Hello, everyone. I wanted to do this as a Facebook Live event, but I think everyone in the world is trying to get on Facebook right now. So I'm just going to record it. This is also a good opportunity because I downloaded a new recording program and I have a new webcam that we're going to use for Into the Abyss when we're all allowed to get back together, that is. You'll notice that the resolution looks a little lower than, say, maybe my camera, but we don't have those crazy autofocusing issues. So this is probably what we're going to be doing to go forward Into the Abyss. Anyway, so today I thought I would read. I thought I'd read every single day. You know, I'm no Josh Mallerman. I'm not Neil Gaiman or anything like that. But I thought I would read every single day from one of my books and just read it to you, several chapters a day, until we get to the end. And the book that I'm going to read, because it's short and it's fast paced, is Hiram Grange and the Chosen One. Okay, brief background. This was my very first published book. I was kind of conscripted by Tim Deal of Shroud Publishing to write an installment in a series about a dark pulp adventure hero named Hiram Grange. He's kind of a ne'er-do-well occult investigator, a little bit like Sherlock Holmes, but maybe not quite as urbane. He's not stupid or brutish or anything like that. He's just a little bit like a blunt force weapon. And he's got some really bad habits. And so he gets assigned, in every case, some occult thing that he has to chase down, and he's got to kill monsters and things like that. Now, mine is book 4 in the series. They're sequential, but they are not, I have to read the first 3 books before I get to this one. All you need to know is that Hiram works for a mysterious organization run by Miss Bothwell, who's kind of like, his M. He has lost people. There was a girl close to him that he lost. Her name was Sadie, and it was his fault that he lost her. And he's also, his father is gone. His mother killed herself. We don't know why. So we are going to start reading chapter 1 of Hiram Grange and the Chosen One, an adventure that takes place in Ireland. Hiram Grange and the Chosen One. Part 1. Chapter 1. Thursday. Belfast, Northern Ireland. He sat naked in a Sumerian circle, cross-legged, hands draped over his knees. His thighs burned and his lower back ached. Summoning was an arduous task, not to be undertaken lightly. For weaklings, it proved fatal, always. He wasn't afraid. He who walks in white had shown him what needed to be done, had given him the means. That and his command of the old tongues had grown. He'd tempered himself through pain, made himself powerful, but that which he strove to bind was powerful also, perhaps more so. Dozens of small cuts stung his chest. 3 slashes on each forearm puckered, red and pulpy. Delicious heat filled him. With rhythmic breaths he harnessed the pain to fuel his will. A chalice sitting in his lap, swirled with blood, spit, and urine. Summonings carried terrible risk. Bindings, however, carried more. If he proved too weak to control the summoned, not only would it destroy him, but it would rampage unchecked until someone intervened, if anyone could. Ancient symbols powered the circle, drawn at equidistant points on the floor around him, with a fingertip dipped in the chalice's mixture. Chanting, he bathed in waves of power. He felt something coming. Soon it would be here. Yig-nig-hak yog-sothoth, he-lik-ti-big, fer-tu-gog-gog, ah! He paused. Come, Yog-Sothoth, I bind thee to my will. The power swelled and pushed against him. He felt its mind, insistent, angry, hungry. Yig-nig-hak saiga-he, lik-ti-farag-ah! Come, Saiga, I bind thee with my will. He clenched the razor blades to nestle in his palms. Fresh pain exploded from each hand as he felt blood squirt between his fingers. He absorbed the pain, brought his fist over the chalice and squeezed viscous red strings into it. It fought him. He fought back. Yang all Yort, Helictor Borfrog! Come, Yort, I bind thee with my will. He opened his eyes and focused on 6 glossy black and white photos of young women laid before him. The faces in each photo had been scratched over with large red strokes. Yingaha Nagye Herdiort! Come, Nagi, spawn of Yort! On the floor before the photos lay a pewter medallion in the shape of a great eye sprouting tentacles. It was the sigil of the summoned. Yingagen Mangla, Yagni Othua, Patrog Ua! Come, Eternal One, Doomwalker, I bind thee with my will. He dropped the blood-smeared razor blades and began to shake. His head snapped forward and his teeth clicked. It lurked at the threshold. The door shivered open. He cast his will upon the 6 photos and the medallion before him. Come, one who is called Yog Sothoth, Sagi Ayort, Eternal One, and Doomwalker, I bind thee with my will. Come, harvest your brood, Nagai. Feed. Something tore free. He swept up the chalice, the contents of which now bubbled, and drank deeply. After a long swallow, he smiled and licked clumps off his teeth. They were coming, and they were hungry. Erin Donahue was late. She scrambled around her flat, getting dressed for tonight's concert. If she hurried, there'd be enough time to practice. God knows she needed it. Not for the first time, she cursed foster mom with a long-winded phone lecture that had made her late to begin with. Of course, foster mom could care less. A professional music career couldn't compare to settling down and starting a family. She'd never be satisfied until Erin did so, and had spent a good 2 hours yakking about it over the phone. Erin clicked through her flat on black stilettos. Hell with it. I'm not your real daughter anyway. Why should I listen to you? Men found her attractive. Her sexual appeal matched her musical one. She'd entertained many lovers. Most for couplings never lasted long, but that suited her fine. Foster mom could go hang for all she cared. She stopped before a hall mirror and tugged at the black, clinging dress that normally looked stunning. Of course, foster mom had yapped so long she hadn't time to iron it before dressing. Score another notch in foster mom's column for making life difficult. She huffed at the mirror's wrinkled reflection, gave her hemline a last tug, then went into the dining room to practice a few rush sets before leaving. Her gaze fell upon today's mail on the kitchen table. She had noticed earlier, but amidst them was a small, padded manila envelope. Her address had been typed. There was no return address. Erin grabbed it, tore it open, and emptied its contents into her palm. A heavy medallion on a chain, made of dull pewter, ringed with strange symbols. In its center gazed an embossed eye, surrounded by what seemed to be tentacles or waving arms. Erin stared. Part of her felt sickened, but another part shivered, strangely thrilled. The medallion's symbols resonated deep, unknowable things, evoking sensations similar to those invoked by music. A bit odd for my tastes, but why not? She slipped the medallion over her neck, approaching the hallway mirror for a good look. Nestled just above the swell of her breasts, it contrasted nicely with her black dress, neither too big nor too small. She regarded herself in the mirror with a raised eyebrow. Well, don't I look ravishing? With a playful swish of her bobbed hair, she turned away. Time to practice. The medallion felt warm against her skin. She breathed so heavily from rushing around that the rise and fall of her chest made it seem as if the medallion throbbed of its own accord. She'd been struggling to find her rhythm for 20 minutes, playing with one eye on her sheet music, the other on the clock, when her throat tickled mid-note and the trumpet uttered a metallic squeak. She tried to continue, but the tickle exploded into a full-blown cough. She jerked the trumpet away. Hand over mouth, Erin coughed, her body bent by sudden, gut-wrenching spasms. With each hack, saliva filled her mouth. Her face burned. Damn it, I'm not missing this conference. Jan will have my head. Another cough. The tickling subsided. She remained bent over for several seconds, savoring the sudden rush of peace. Then she opened her eyes. Blood covered her hand. She tasted a copper saltiness. Her stomach froze as she looked in the mirror. Thick blood covered her lips. Something small and white wriggled at the corner of her mouth. Dazed, she wiped it and touched something slick and wet. When she pulled her hand away, it was coated in red. Almost candy apple red, she thought. And in her palm shivered the thing that she'd seen on her face, a white worm. Revulsion filled her. It had come from inside her. It had caused the tickling. Horrified, she flung the thing away. But almost immediately her coughing resumed, more violently than before. She doubled over again, but this time didn't bother covering her mouth. She spewed bloody clots, which painted the floor with bright red starfish patterns. She felt a liquid coiling inside. Her guts squirmed. She looked at her trumpet's mouthpiece and whimpered. Blood dripped from it. She'd bled from her mouth while playing and hadn't noticed. Her mind teetered when she saw worms poke their heads from the mouthpiece. She gagged, threw the trumpet away, and staggered towards the kitchen garbage to vomit. With a rocking leap, the trash bin jerked and she skidded to a halt. A pregnant quiet filled the room. The lid flipped up and down. Something inside batted it, almost playfully, as if taunting her. It flipped up and down again, opening and closing. She jerked every time. The medallion burned against her skin. The lid flipped open again, but this time something caught it from inside, held it open a crack. Maggots poured out and down the can, to the floor, a blanketing army of whiteness swarming towards her. She swarmed away as they piled around her feet and squirmed up her ankles. She gazed blearily at the garbage can, lid still open a crack, and saw eyes blinking in the can's darkness. As the maggots burrowed through her stockings and then skin, squid-like tentacles curled over the can's edge and flicked the air. She stared, mesmerized as fleshy arms slowly unfurled. Something heavy and slick rose from the garbage can. Eyes glittered. She screamed as it tumbled from the can, bounced off the floor and flew at her, tentacles weaving, eyes blinking, mouths puckering. The man relaxed and sat back. The ritual was done. Great pleasure suffused him, for coming soon was the destruction of Hiram Grange. Chapter 2. It didn't matter how hard Hiram ran. He could never reach Sadie in time. As his feet pounded against the sidewalk, black hounds swarmed over her, pulled her down. Onyx teeth tore her open as she screamed, "Sadie!" He reached for the Webley, his fingers feeling nothing but the cold, flimsy leather of his shoulder holster, because something screeched behind him. Hiram spun about, now in his parents' bedroom, and saw his mother rising gracefully from her ruined cello. She turned and put the Webley, his father's Webley, the same gun that later claimed Sadie, to her head. As Hiram struggled, his feet mired in blood, he heard her say, "Damn you, Hiram. Damn you to hell." His mother pulled the trigger. The side of her head blew away in wet chunks. Sadie screamed. His mother screamed. He tried to save them, but the thickening blood pooled at his feet, rose past his ankles, and held him fast while their cries tore into his soul. Sadie screamed, his mother screamed, and he screamed, because they were all one, joined forever in torment in the abyss. They all screamed, over and over. Hiram awoke. He felt coated in slime. For a moment, he thought he was in the abyss, lost forever in darkness. He couldn't breathe. "Hey!" What the hell are you doing? Pitching a fit? Hiram inhaled. He massaged his chest, tried to slow his heart. Perspiration-soaked clothes stuck to his chilled skin. Hey, you all right back there? It rushed back. He was bound for London's Heathrow Airport, on the way to Northern Ireland in his next assignment. He'd fallen asleep in the cab. Blinking, he looked up. Pinprick eyes glared at him in the rearview mirror. Well? Hiram didn't reply. He closed his eyes and ran through a meditation cycle he'd learned from monks in Cambodia years ago, when he'd been hunting a jungle daemon in the village of Sanglai. Slowly, the nightmare faded. He pushed the darkness back into its little box. Damn you, Hiram. I'm fine. Bloody marvelous, really. The driver focused on the road. Hiram gazed out the window and tried to stop the darkness from morphing into thousands of screaming faces. Tried to stop seeing Sadie's and his mother's among them. The door loomed at the end of a dark hall. Something waited there, but she couldn't reach it. Otherworldly cries chilled her spine. She ran faster. Her lungs burned, heart hammered, as something powerful built within. But she couldn't get any closer. If she could just get there, open it and run through, she'd be safe. At the last moment, her fingers brushed the doorknob when something yanked her back into the darkness. Therese Fitzgerald bolted upright and stifled a scream. Her legs twisted in sweaty bedsheets. The couch she'd woke on felt damp, cold. Throwing off the sheets, she sat up and cupped her face in her hands. She hadn't had that nightmare in months. Not since meeting Reggie. Why was it back? Because you and Reggie are quits, love. Makes sense, right? What a bitch. She ran a trembling hand through her long blonde hair, stood up and approached Cassie's street side window. Cassie was a friend from university who'd graduated last year. They'd kept in touch, conversing often over lunch or coffee. After her blow-up with Reggie this afternoon, she hadn't anyone to talk with. Even after 3 years at university, she'd made few friends. Cassie was one of them, so Therese had rung her up. Cassie invited her to spend the night. Relieved, Therese accepted the offer. It provided a brief sanctuary, but didn't change the fact that she and Reggie were through. She sighed. As she leaned on the cool glass of the window, she played with a small charm in her bracelet no bigger than her thumb. It was round, with an upraised slash through it, much like a lightning bolt. One side of the bolt had been engraved with a small quill and book, the other embedded with 3 small crystals, red, white, and blue. Found on a chain around her neck when she was left in an orphanage just outside Glenfinnan, it was the only proof that she'd ever had any family. A nun had kept it until Therese grew older. She stayed at the orphanage until 10. After that, the system shuffled her from foster home to foster home until she turned 18. Though it sounded trite, at least she'd always had the charm. On lonely nights, it reminded her that, even as she'd been given up, someone had still cared. Then came Reggie, sweet, handsome in a rugged way. He wasn't a college student, but a steelworker. His innocence had attracted Therese. To her, the unassuming Reggie seemed perfect. Of course, she hadn't foreseen his insecurities, or imagined he'd become so possessive. Lately, their fights had worsened, and even though he always apologized with wine and flowers, it wasn't long before something new set him off. The night's chill seeped through the glass. Her thin shirt and boxers poor defense against the cold. Therese hugged herself. She didn't step away from the window, however. She stopped looking at the city lights burning against the darkness. Today's row with Reggie had been terrible. She kept an off-campus post office box for her art correspondence, and Reggie often fetched the mail when he visited. She'd received a very strange package today, containing an odd-looking medallion on a chain. It had no return address or note. Of course, Reggie had assumed it was a gift from a secret lover. She thought the medallion repulsive. Ringed with strange symbols, in the center leered a gigantic eye surrounded by squiggles that she assumed were tentacles. Why anyone would send her such a thing, or how it could be thought a clandestine gift of passion, she hadn't the faintest idea. She'd refused to touch it, called Reggie an idiot, and he stuffed it into his pocket and stormed out, after coming all the way into town to do her a favor by taking an old rug to the shop because she was too busy. She felt bad about that, but what could she do? She sighed. It might be time to kick Reggie off unless he gave her an absolutely fantastic reason why she shouldn't. That wasn't impossible, of course. She'd forgiven him several times before, and she couldn't deny her need for companionship. However, if it came down to it, she could do without him, because of her painting. Painting made her feel alive, made her feel like she could touch something more real than this world. Since her first brushstroke at age 12, painting had consumed her life. And quite frankly, Reggie couldn't compare. He knew it, too, hence the fights. Often, however, painting was difficult, sometimes frightening, especially when she painted her dreams and nightmares. In a moment crystallized in memory, she recalled the first time she dreamed of that dark hallway and door, and the paintings she'd made of them. That hadn't been so bad. It had been cathartic, even, because until now the dream had stayed away. Of course, there was also the painting from 2 months ago. One of such horrible purpose she'd thrown a cloth over it, pushed it in the corner, and forgotten about it. She didn't want to think about that, though. Not at all. She sighed. Reggie would be a loss, but she could live without him. Painting, however, wasn't enough anymore. Things were changing. She needed more, and that was probably the real reason for the nightmare's return. She needed something and was running towards it, but she had no idea what it was. Yawning as exhaustion tugged her eyelids, Therese returned to the couch, lay down, and wrapped herself up in the sofa's cardigan instead of the sweat-dampened sheets. She fell asleep and dreamed of doors and hallways and a painting she wanted to forget. Chapter 3, Friday Night. As Box, Toccata, and Fugue wavered through the agency's safe house in Belfast, Hiram's well-oiled routine carried him through his fatigue. What little sleep he'd gotten had been haunted by the ever more frequent nightmares of... No, not that. Not now. Hiram briefly assessed the room. It smelled musty, with faded yellow wallpaper peeling in places and old, thin carpeting, but it looked acceptable enough. It wasn't his Airstream trailer, his home, but it would suffice. As usual, most needs had been provided for. Dinner had been waiting. A serving of angels on horseback, which consisted of delicately marinated and stewed oysters wrapped in tangy strips of bacon, all placed on thick slabs of hot buttered Irish beer bread. He'd enjoyed a chilled bottle of Pinot Noir with it. Though not absinthe, as a side it had served. Soon, however, he'd need to find some real refreshment. He swept up the Webley from the closed bureau, and engaged the barrel catch, and inspected the cylinder for debris, ignoring the spent shell, the suicide shell. Finding nothing, he spun the cylinder. When it stopped turning, he took a few cartridges from the bureau and loaded the remaining chambers, except the one with the hand-scored round. Finished, he snapped the Webley shut and secured it in his shoulder holster. His personal satchel sat in the bureau also, filled with the mysticals, odds, and ends he employed as needed. Various mind-enhancing drugs, lime salt and chalk, pentacles and crosses, small vials of consecrated water, and other alchemical materials. He straightened and regarded himself in the bureau's mirror. His bony, too long limbs and lanky frame would never properly fit the suit he wore, his father's suit. But still he adjusted his jacket with ineffective tugs on both lapels, then pulled at his waistcoat, trying to align the buttons with his belt buckle. Failing miserably, he shook his head and frowned at his reflection. Blue eyes stared back at thin lips and prominent cheekbones, set against a pallid complexion, but these features paled in comparison to his nose, an overgrown, hawkish mass. Bloody hell, I'm balding. With his fingers, he vainly brushed loose strands of oily black hair over his receding hairline. Giving up, Hiram turned and approached a recliner in front of which sat a combination television VCR. For his assignment, a tape had been left. He'd study and destroy it. Hiram sat awkwardly in the low-slung recliner and lit the Presbyterian mixture in his briarwood pipe. At least the agency had remembered to supply one of the truly important things. Now slightly more relaxed, he took up an old remote from the chair's armrest, turned on the television, and pressed play. Static resolved into the smiling portrait of Mrs. Bothwell. Good evening, Hiram. I hope your flight was relaxing and that all is in order. All your basic supplies should be there, though an additional shipment is still in transit. Never fear, it will reach you shortly. The image paused, glanced downwards. Papers ruffled. When it looked up again, its kindly expression had sobered. Last night, our analysts detected enormous spikes of electromagnetic activity in Belfast, Northern Ireland, which have continued into this evening. Since then, we've gathered some disturbing police reports. 5 young women were slain last night, brutally killed. Disemboweled, really, within a 3-mile radius of one another. One of them was found not far from you, in an alley off Patchett Street. No connections have been found between them except this. They were raised in either state homes or orphanages. Odd, but we don't know what that means yet. EM scans place the confluence somewhere in the university quarter of South Belfast, the main campus for Queen's University. There appears to be a talismanic element to this confluence. Thanks to an informant in a local PSNI, we learned that each victim was found with the following medallion. Bothwell's face was replaced by said medallion. Hiram paused the video and studied the archaic symbols ringing its edges. In the center, a gigantic eye ringed by tentacles. He clicked play. After extensive research, we determined the glyphs to be either Sumerian or early Babylonian. The findings are disturbing. Something cold bloomed in Bothwell's eyes. Whatever she'd learned, it had unnerved her. According to several ancient texts, most importantly the Necromonicon, on loan from Miskatonic University, the sigil represents an ancient god notorious for its hunger. Many stories call it a shapeshifter, changeling, mannequin, false man. Other stories believe it is an infestation or a plague. It has many names. Yog-Sothoth is one. The most popular, however, the Tanar'ri. All the texts indicate an extensive summoning ritual, but no particular artifact is mentioned. This makes things more difficult. The confluence's source could be a talisman or a conduit. As such, a pocket EM scanner has been included in your supplies. I know you're uncomfortable with technology, Hiram, but in this case, you'll just have to make do. At least you didn't send me a cell phone. Can't stand those things. There's something else. Based on the stories, this creature has been summoned numerous times, most often during war. Not long after, both sides mysteriously vanish from recorded history. A pause. The implications are clear. Indeed, this could go to hell very quickly. Your objective, of course, is to either find the summoning talisman and destroy it, or eliminate the confluence's conduit, thus breaking the binding and banishing the Tanar'ri. Bothwell's image paused on the screen. With a flash of insight, Hiram suspected that the Tanar'ri hadn't unnerved her as much as something else. One last note. We also detected faint quantum fluctuations at all the crime scenes. Hiram sat back. A chill crept up his spine. You've got to be kidding me. Kali's tit, please say you're kidding me. We need to assume they're involved. We'll ignore them as usual and hope they ignore us. However, be on your guard. They're not to be trusted, no matter what. Oh, hell, 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 hell. Hiram leaned forward and covered his face. Fairies. I hate fairies. Chapter 4. Please, Therese, can't we at least talk about it? Reggie, we've been over this so many times. Reggie winced as he trotted through the cold wind. He didn't have an answer for that, did he? It was just how he was built. When he looked in the mirror, he never measured up. Before, it hadn't mattered. He'd nothing much to lose. Then came Therese. Suddenly, a steel mill jockey like himself was dating a beautiful college student and artist. At first it had been bliss, but later all he could do was worry he might lose her to someone better. The irony, he was driving her away. Please give me another chance. If we can't sort it out, you can tell me to piss off and I'll go away. Reggie, a pause. Fine, where should we meet? Reggie's heart skipped. Maybe Jimmy's, down by Tiger's Bay? If it's too packed, we could slip out to that all-night place down the street, the Skylark, and grab a bite. Fine, I'm at the hub, but I've no cash left. I'll have to walk. Take me 20 minutes. You better be buying, boyo. You bet. Thanks, Therese. You won't regret this, I promise. Sure. See you there. The cell clicked off. Right then, he mumbled, disappointed by her abruptness. Love you, too. He stuffed the cell into his pocket and wondered how to convince Therese to forgive him. The whole thing was his fault, really. If only he hadn't acted like such an ass. Reggie paused at an intersection haloed by the dull orange glow of a street lamp. The thought of losing Therese soured his stomach. He wished that stupid medallion had never come in the mail. Maybe none of this would have happened. From his pocket he pulled the padded envelope containing the necklace and its charm. He shook it into his open palm. It felt oddly warm. Holding his chain, Reggie could see Therese's point. Damn thing was ugly. Who'd send it to a lover? As it swayed on his chain, an odd compulsion urged him to wear it. Why? He shrugged. Why the hell not? He slipped the chain around his neck, the warm metal disc settling against his chest. He looked down at the manila packaging in his hands. Things were so much better in retrospect. If it had been a gift, wouldn't it have been wrapped? He kicked the curb. Idiot. Now. Why would such a sweet thing like yourself be talking so? Reggie straightened. The silken voice came from an alley he'd just passed. Retracing his steps, he found a young woman leaning against a dingy red brick wall. She wore a ragged buttoned-up fur coat. Long, creamy white legs ended in slut-red pumps. She smiled and devoured him with bright eyes. Red lips smirked on a full face framed by thick, unruly brown locks. Hello? Who are you? The woman smiled, all white teeth. Your dreams come true, love. Therese wobbled as she walked in the night. The hub was far from the city's center and she felt conflicted, glad for the quiet, unnerved by her isolation. Her anxiety got the best of her and she quickened her pace. It didn't help that she downed 3, 4 shots of Smirnoff with Cassie and her friends at some ridiculous club over in Chester. Then, of all things, Reggie had called. Unbelievably, she'd agreed to meet him so he could plead his case. Sighing, she brushed several hairs back from her flushed but cold face. Maybe she should just go home, forget Reggie. He'd be upset, but he'd survive. She kept walking. Life would be much simpler if she ditched. Of course, her life had never been simple. Why start now? It's a bleeding shame a young man like yourself should spend such a cold night alone. The hooker cocked her head and raised a carefully penciled eyebrow. Reggie paused. You'd never shagged a hooker before. I suppose. He stepped into the alley for a better look. The whore lifted her chin, as if in subtle challenge. Well, anything I can do to make the blues go away? Guilt burned inside him, but Reggie couldn't help staring. She looked striking, alabaster skin pearlescent, pouting lips full and generous. He felt disloyal, but his heart pounded. I don't know. I've never... Well, I've plenty of suggestions, Lolly. Loads. She sauntered into the streetlight's glare. She had high cheekbones, and under the fur coat lurked possibly the biggest breasts he'd ever seen. They rose and fell as she breathed. She placed a hand on her chest and smiled, red lips shining. Almost like blood. Her hand felt warm. Waves of pleasurable heat flowed through him. He followed the hand's movement down his chest with an entranced gaze, mesmerized as she unzipped his coat. She reached inside and flipped loose one shirt button after the other. Well, I mean, what would it cost? I'm not flush, love. She pursed her lips, snagged his belt buckle, and pulled him close. Her hot breath tickled his ear. Not much, dear. Just your bloody heart. Reggie's guilty lust disappeared. He pulled back and frowned. This had been a very bad idea. What the? His stomach lurched as a worm wriggled from the corner of the hooker's mouth. Oh, hell! She smiled and gulped it down. Mmm, that's a fine treat, love. Reggie gagged. Maggots streamed from her mouth and wriggled from her nostrils. In a sickening delirium, he imagined them craning their heads and hissing at him. She shrugged off her coat. Give us a kiss. Reggie screamed at what he saw. A bloated body with oozing skin, swarming with writhing maggots. Thick tentacles squirmed under the jacket. Their tips licked the air. Reggie tried to break free, but he was too slow. Fleshy ropes wrapped around his arms and legs. He flailed while it dragged him to an oily breast. Before he could scream again, a thick eel-like tongue plunged between his lips and forced his jaws open. The smell of rot filled his nostrils, and he gagged as worms poured down his throat. Thousands of tiny, hungry mouths ate at his insides. As he died, his cell jangled Teresa's ringtone.